Welcome back, everyone, to your favorite travel channel, The Adventure Guide. In this episode, I will be sharing a location that may produce obtainable evidence of a dogman or werewolf every single night. Since around the mid-1860s, there have been rumors of a werewolf-type creature, perhaps a dogman, perhaps a Bigfoot, that has been terrorizing the county of Dixon in Tennessee. It is claimed that the beast has killed 3 men around 1875. And believe it or not, there are still sightings to this day, and one park ranger openly states that something shows up in the general location every single night around 10:15 p.m.
But when the train goes through Burns and blows its whistle, you can hear some sort of animal howling. What that is, I don't know, but it is rather unusual.
As we've been told, strange howls are often heard as the 10:15 train leaves the station and passes through Burns, Tennessee.
The location is super easy to access, and you can even camp there. So assemble your team, grab your tent, your sleeping bag, and gear, and prepare to go camping with werewolves at Montgomery Belle State Park, home of Werewolf Springs. Just a short distance outside of Nashville, Tennessee are the towns of White Bluff, Dixon, and Burns. This area is a cryptid hotspot that is very convenient to investigate or simply attempt an encounter with whatever it is that lurks in the area. Between the towns of White Bluff and Burns runs a railroad along Highway 47. This is the hottest area for encounters, especially in Montgomery Belle State Park. In the 1860s, large numbers of livestock were disappearing in Dixon County. Often, there was no trace of the missing animals, and other times they were found half-eaten and torn apart. Local legend states that they began to disappear not long after a circus train derailed outside of the town of Burns. The stock cars remained in good condition, and all the animals were accounted for except a pair of something called wolfmen, which were supposed to be humanoid-looking things. The second story of its origin is that the werewolf-like creatures are native to the area. However, the problem with them was provoked when a mating pair were attacked by the townsfolk. They killed one in fear of its appearance and buried the oddity near the location of Hall Cemetery. The second beast that survived the attack haunted the area near the burial site. The third story is that 4 cemeteries in the area make a portal where they cross, and that these are demonic entities. Whatever their origins, there were no accounts of them attacking humans. That is until one day when a farmer who owned a homestead on the Harpeth River traveled to the train depot in Burns to pick up a door for a structure on his farm. They loaded the door into the back of the wagon and headed home. It was just the farmer and a hired hand. They began their journey on the road to the Harpeth River, which is today Highway 47. As they traveled, they heard outlandish noises in the forest, no doubt spooking the mules pulling the wagon. The sun was still up, but low enough to be blotted out by the forest trees. The men kept looking back, thinking they saw a shadow or something dashing through the trees following them. Though neither locked eyes on it, they both thought something was there and quickened the pace of the mules. Looking back again, it was still coming, so they drove the mules faster. Eventually, they were sure something was giving chase. They had the mules running as fast as they could down the shadowy forest road. A loud clack on wood made them turn around and look. There in the back of the wagon was what appeared to be a werewolf. They both jumped and tumbled out of the moving wagon. The farmer ran into the forest on one side of the road, and the hired hand ran into the other side. The farmer ran in terror, waiting to be pounced on when he spied a hollowed-out log on the ground. He crawled in, holding his breath between pants, listening for its footsteps. He then heard his hired hand screaming, "No, no, no!" over and over till it was replaced with the screams of torment. Then silence. The farmer looked and listened. He heard it coming his way and saw the beast. It was a tall, vicious, hairy humanoid. As he laid under the log, it walked right past him. He lost sight of it, but remained in the log till the sun was high up the next day and heard the hooves of horses and the rumbling wheels of a wagon. He ran to them and hitched a ride safely back to Burns. There a posse was assembled and rode out to the site of the attack. They found the wagon tracks in the dirt, but they just stopped abruptly, and there was no wagon. It had literally vanished. The posse was puzzled as to how this was possible. The mule's tracks continued on, but the wagon vanished at that spot. They broke up in groups and searched the forest near the spot for clues and managed to locate the wagon. It was found laying in a deep ravine. There were no tracks or drag marks leading to the ravine. It had to have been picked up and thrown in there. The posse reassembled and followed the mule's tracks till they found them torn apart and half-eaten. The body of the hired hand was never found, but they found plenty of blood at the scene of the attack. The town decided to form a hunting party to trap and kill the beast. They headed down the road, which is now Highway 47, with a goat. They found a game trail leading off the road into the forest and scouted it out. It led to a clearing, and there in the clearing were the bones and remains of numerous animals. They believed this was where the beast brought its kills to feast. The posse chose this clearing for an ambush site. They tethered the goat in middle of the clearing, then split up in pairs and positioned themselves on the circumference of the clearing. Then they sat and awaited the killer to meander into the ambush site. The men became more and more drowsy as the night wore on, but after 4 hours of waiting, the beast appeared in the bright moonlight. It waltzed up to the goat, and the leader of the posse shouted to fire. With one loud thunder, they unleashed hell and a volley of lead upon the beast. However, as they went for a second round, it was gone. The goat was also missing. The order was given to turn their lanterns on full bright and meet at the center. One by one, they lit them up and made their way there. That is all except one pair of men who were found dead at their station. With 3 people dead, the townsfolk decided they needed something with a little more firepower, so they hired a big game hunter to deal with the beast. Though such a man probably would have taken the job for free just for the glory, the town agreed to pay any man who dared to help, handsomely. They enticed one man to bring his large-caliber rifle to dispatch this thing back to hell. When he arrived, they detailed him on what had happened and that it appeared to be a werewolf. The man, undaunted by their terrifying stories, said he wasn't concerned. He took the money and set off to an old cabin in the woods. There he baited the woods in front of a cabin window and waited. He stayed vigilant through the night. However, the sun arose, and he was unsuccessful. So he tried again the second night, and no such beast was about. The third night rolled around, and it appeared to be a dud, however. At some point he heard a noise in the woods. Things were going as planned. The beast stepped into the moonlight and growled at the hunter. The hunter fired an enormous chunk of lead directly into the beast, and this time the large caliber had some impact. The beast wailed a loud, painful scream, but quickly rebounded from the hit and charged the cabin. The hunter looked over at the door as the beast began to wail on it. It was giving way, and eventually the beast broke it down. This was exactly as the hunter had planned. As the beast stepped in, the hunter was gone. Then a flash illuminated the cabin from the rafters, and a bullet struck the beast. The werewolf had walked into a carefully laid-out trap. The wily hunter had made his way into the high rafters and pulled the rope up with him. He was out of reach of the werewolf and continued firing his mighty lead slugs into the hellish abomination. The hunter ran out of rounds and had not stopped the beast. Therewith, he drew forth his revolver. He fired 4 shots into it and saved 2. He claimed that the last 2 were to fire one at point-blank range into its face, and the last one to take his own life. The beast was determined to rip the hunter from the rafters and obliterate him with its claws and fangs. It jumped, snapped, and clawed at the hunter for hours, till sunlight began to shine through the broken-down door. At that point, it fled and disappeared out of sight. The hunter returned to town, shaken to the core. He returned the money and fled the county. Jumping forward to the late 1950s, a boy named Buford Yates and 2 of his friends decided to sneak into Camp Serratoma to swim. The Girl Scouts were coming soon, so staff had just readied the pool for the summer. One night, the boys snuck past the streetlight out front and made their way about 60 feet in from the road to the pool. While they were swimming, Buford caught sight of someone approaching. They were sneaking up, hunched over, trying to stay low. Buford told the boys to hush, that they may have been caught. The boys were at the far end of the pool, trying to stay out of sight, while Buford kept watching. The staff member came right up to the fence, which was 20 feet away. But it wasn't a staff member. The being was about 6 foot tall and completely covered in hair. Buford screamed in terror, and the thing ran behind the changing room. Buford, needing to know where this monstrosity was, jumped out of the pool, grabbed his flashlight, and shined it in the direction it ran. When the beam from his flashlight hit it, a pair of eyes reflected brightly with an intense red eye shine. Buford dropped the flashlight and began running back and forth inside the pool area like a caged animal. He had no idea what to do. When the other boys approached Buford, he was visibly pale and filled with terror. Buford said it was absolutely not an animal and clearly human-like. He had no idea if it was Bigfoot or the werewolf.
It was something that was, human-like. It's about 6 feet tall and had hair just all over its body.
In 1978, a high school girl witnessed something violently shaking the saplings near her home. She went outside to get a better look at what was going on, and it began to snap some of the saplings. She got a good look at the culprit and said it looked like a gorilla. The next day, she told the boys at school, and they formed an investigation team consisting of Ed Littleton, Buddy Tidwell, a boy named Jeff, and several others. I interviewed Buddy Tidwell, and he will tell us about the events of 1978 later in the video.
We saw the thing. The moon came out again, and the thing yelled and walked between those 2 largest cedar trees, and then it began to come toward us in such a way that we thought it was going to wind up between us and the car. So we took off running, and you could feel the thing as its feet hit the ground behind you.
9 years late, in 1987, something appeared to be coming out of Ruskin Cave at night. A small stream flowed out of the mouth of the cave and into Yellow Creek. From somewhere inside, a hairy beast would emerge after sundown and splash through the water, leaving the cave. A few families were hired to maintain and keep an eye on the grounds and the cave, which I believe was owned by the country singer David Allan Coe at the time. One family with a 14-year-old daughter lived near the mouth of the cave. The daughter went out to a ball game, and by the time she got home that night, the entrance gate was locked. So, she had to walk up the road to the house. She was carrying a bag of leftover candy from the game. She burst through the front door, screaming in terror, dirty, and her back had large bruises. She was extremely frantic and could not calm down enough to talk. It took several minutes before she could cry out that a giant hairy beast attacked her and took the bag of candy. Her mother went to the window and looked out, most likely expecting to see a bear. As the mother looked out the window, she almost physically blacked out from terror. The beast was standing there looking straight in the window at her, and they locked eyes. The mother said she almost blacked out because of its size, its appearance, how close it was, and how it was looking at her. She described it as 8 to 9 foot tall, with a flat face, round eyes, and was covered in coarse hair. The rest of the summer was haunted by its screams and roars that would panic all the pets. That same summer, a tour guide was leading a group into Jewel Cave, which connects to Ruskin Cave way in the back.
Cave is actually one that was accidentally found when they were building this road in Yellow Creek. When they discovered it in 1885, apparently they decided to make it into a tourist-type cave.
As the group wound their way through the passages of the cave, something unleashed an evil and horrifying scream. No humans have such lungs, and it set the group into a panicked flight as they ran for the exit. The company cancelled the tours for a while after that incident. Once the summer ended, things died down. In 1990, 11-year-old Corey Williams may have stumbled upon the home or origins of the beast. However, we could not verify if Corey actually had this encounter or made it up for a local TV series. Near where he grew up, there was an old abandoned home known as the Kelly House. The Kellys had moved to Tennessee from California in the late 1850s or early part of the 1860s. It was claimed that Mrs. Kelly had strayed away from God and was getting involved with a dark cult and in the dark arts. So, Mr. Kelly moved the family away from Mrs. Kelly's dark acquaintances in California in hopes she would stop dabbling with magic. But it didn't work as she continued to practice her dark arts in Dickson County. The Kelly home sat abandoned near the Williams house for many decades, and Corey's dad told the kids not to go near the home. However, one night, Corey's older brother Clay and his friend Michael took Corey out to the old Kelly home to scare him. They went into the home and began to retell all the creepy stories of the house when they heard something bipedal run across the floor in the attic above them. Instead of running home, the boys unwisely chose to investigate it. They walked over to the door with the stairway into the attic and started walking up into it. They only went up high enough to peek their heads into the attic. Something was hunched in the far back corner, faced away from them. They could not see details, but could clearly see a dark thing that appeared to be made of material matter. The chimney ran through the attic by the stairway, and a brick had fallen loose. Michael grabbed the brick and hurled it at the object. It didn't make a clack, but a thud, like they hit flesh, like a body. At that point, the thing popped up, turned, and ran straight for the boys. They ran screaming to the top of their lungs in terror. They outran the being and made it to safety. Elijah Henderson of Clarksville, Tennessee, and founder of Cryptid Studies Institute, has the origins of his interest in Bigfoot and cryptids from his first encounter at Werewolf Springs. When he was a young child, he was hiking with his father and some family members when the train chugged down the rails near them and blew its horn. It triggered a monstrous howl, and it set not only his family into panic, but other hikers. The howl sounded like it came from a wolf, the size of a rhinoceros or an elephant. It terrified Elijah so bad he would only go hiking with his father, and not at that park. But he started checking out books on Bigfoot and other cryptids to get some power and control over his fear of them. Elijah has also covered this story on his channel, and he has some other encounters in it that I will not touch upon. I will leave a link to his channel in the description below. Please consider visiting his channel. I'm about to introduce Buddy Tidwell, whom I spoke of earlier. But first, we have a well-earned shout-out to make.
Hey everyone, this is Ken, and I have a very huge shout out to make, and that goes out to Darcy for her support of this channel for some time now. Not only is she one of the first ones to watch a video when it's released, but she's often one of the first to comment. Recently, she also gave the channel a $50 gift in the comment section of the video. That $50 was reinvested to improve the channel. So if you are enjoying the content, be sure to give Darcy a huge thank you in the comments section below.
And now for an incredible interview with Buddy Tidwell. Here is his story.
In 1978, back around that time, I was 16 or 17 years old and in high school. And a very reliable girl in our class came to school one day saying that she had seen a huge hairy creature outside of her house in a fairly populated residential area. It had been in a small grove of trees, and she noticed these trees were shaking violently, and she went out to get a little bit closer look. Dogs were barking, and she said she saw this thing just covered in hair, almost reminded her of a gorilla, and it was reaching up high on a tree and shaking, and it had actually broke the tree. And she was, it had affected her pretty good. Well, a group of me and my friends heard her tell the story, and she was not the kind of person that was prone to make something up. In fact, she was far from that. We really, believed that there was something to this, and so we asked her if we could come over to her neighborhood and investigate, and we did, and she generally showed us the area where this had occurred, and we went over there, and we found a sapling. It was probably 3 or 4 inches, and this is in the springtime, sort of a green sapling that was broken up about 6 foot. It had just been freshly broken over. And so it substantiated her story. Well, me and the group of friends went over to investigate this after school one day. We sort of fancied ourselves as outdoorsmen and adventurers and hunters. So we went to the library and got maps of the area and started looking to see, if this thing was in the neighborhood, could it be occupying a cave or something? Where would we likely go hunt for this? And so about half a mile from where she had seen this thing in a residential area, there was a large tract of farmland, several hundred acres, and it had a cave on it. It was sort of marked on the map. And we started looking around that area, supposing that, maybe that thing, there was a, geographically, there was a valley like coming out of that area that ran right down to where she had seen this thing. So we started investigating around on that farm and kind of took the approach of going up that valley toward the cave. And when we got close to the cave, we began to see footprints from this thing. We found a number of footprints, and we measured those footprints. They were about 18 inches long and about 12 inches wide. They were so significant that we could see, like, I guess what you would call ridge characteristics, like you would associate with somebody's fingerprint. We could see creases in the flesh in these footprints. We could see some ridge characteristics, like you would see in a human skin pressed in something, freshly in the mud. So one of these prints some of them were partial prints where you only saw the balls, the feet, and the toes. And there were, oddly, just 3 toes that were predominant on the end of these things. You could see like separation between where the ball of the foot and then the toes would be. And there were 3 toes, and then you could actually see like claw impressions in the mud where, maybe protruding claws were, particularly when this thing was going uphill, you would see that. We went and got some plaster of Paris, and we actually made a cast of this footprint and preserved it. And we took it to our high school. We showed it to some of our high school teachers in the sciences and biology and chemistry area. And, they thought it was really odd, the footprint, but didn't have any clue as to what we could do to try to get a better identification on this, what could have, possibly left this print. So our obsession with finding this thing sort of grew. And around that time, there began to be stories in the newspaper of a neighboring county. First, somebody had spotted a creature like this walking through a cornfield and then had left tracks. We never could get in touch with that farmer or get permission. I'm sure he was just kind of flooded with calls. We were going to go over there and compare what was there to what we had actually seen. Time wore on from spring to mid-spring and then late spring, and all of a sudden school is out, and now we would go over there in the afternoons and then, have time constraints associated with high school to investigate. We kind of transitioned into almost full-time investigating this thing for a couple of weeks. We started going over at times that we were never able to go over into this farm and into the wooded area near it. We started going early in the morning, then we started going later in the evening, and then finally our trips progressed to night over there. So during some of the exploration, we found a small outbuilding and sort of out of the way on the farm. It had been abandoned, but obviously had been used in the past. But we found these claw marks on the side of the building, where it had actually clawed through like corrugated metal that was on the side of these sheds, and you could see them, 7 feet tall claw marks down to maybe 5 feet tall. They were pretty extensive, and it actually had peeled off, part of the metal. There were like curlicues of metal emanating from these claw marks. So we started to go over there at night in groups of us, and we would, first with flashlights. And back in those days, we were hunters. We would go armed over there. We would carry our squirrel guns or shotguns and flashlights and be pretty well equipped. We're trying to see this thing, but we realized pretty soon, that the only way we might have a chance to actually spot this thing was to go in, a little bit more surreptitiously than we had been, just be quiet and not take a lot of lights. And so we started traveling much lighter and coming in much quieter, much like hunting. On one of the trips over there in the afternoon, we got into the cave, and we had crawled back into the cave, and we found like the remains of a small animal. I think probably it was a young goat that had been, killed. It was pretty recent, pretty fresh, and it had been partially eaten. So we found this in the cave. And one night, without much planning, we decided that we were going to go over there probably 10, 11 o'clock at night. And several of us went. We only had one flashlight between us. We didn't, it wasn't really a prepared trip. We had kind of got complacent, but we thought, maybe this is the night we'll see it. There was a nice full moon. And so we went over to the area, took sort of a different approach than we would normally enter this area, parked probably about a half a mile from the general area we were investigating was the road. We parked there, and we jumped over a big agricultural gate. These are, what I would call a 3-rail gate. It's made out of very heavy gauge metal and galvanized kind of a structured steel agricultural gate. We went in that way, and we were walking up this hill, which was kind of, on the other side of the valley that we would normally traverse to get in there. And it was just a field, and we knew from past experience how many cows were in that field because we had been in there maybe tens of times, and we had noticed how many cows were in the field. Well, on this particular night, with our flashlight, we could shine around, and these cows were nearby. We counted, I think it was, as I recall, maybe 8 cows were supposed to be in this particular lot, and we counted 8 sets of green eyes, and then we saw a 9th set of eyes, and it was glowing red. So we focused on that red set of eyes, thinking that maybe this was, what we've been pursuing the whole time. And the moon was nice and full, and this, when we shined the light over there, we kind of lose our night vision. Well, we started up the hill toward this and took a couple of steps, and clouds sort of went over the moon, and it got dark, and about that time we heard this thing yell and scream. It went from like the lowest guttural sort of yell you could imagine to like a really high scream, like a woman's scream, and it was long and sustained, and it was so powerful that we could actually feel the vibration of that scream in your body. Well, it had gotten dark. We had that one single flashlight, and we continued to focus on the area with the light off, trying to get our night vision and see this thing. All of a sudden, we could, when the moon came back out, we could see the silhouette of this thing, and it screamed again, and it began to move toward us. And at that point in time, every time it would step, you could feel the ground shake. You could literally feel the weight of this thing, vibrating the ground as it started to come down the hill toward us. So we got a good look at the silhouette of it. It was fairly close to us, and we could smell a smell of, this smelled like rotten eggs. It was a terrible stench in the air. And we took off back toward the car where we had parked, and the thing yelled again. We looked as we were, at this point, we're kind of running and stopping to look back, and every time you could stop, you could feel the ground, this thing coming. And so we ran back toward that gate, jumped over the gate, made it back to the vehicle we're in, which is kind of pointed at that gate, but a distance from it. We got in the vehicle, we're all scared to death, and we turned the vehicle on and turned the lights on, and this thing is coming over that agricultural gate. It stands on the other side of it, yells again, huge arm, bigger than my leg, and I'm a fairly good-sized individual, but this arm came up and smashed the top of that gate, and then this thing comes over the gate in just one step, just whoop, over the gate and coming toward our vehicle. So we take off, and we're out of there. And so the next day, obviously, we're telling people, that had been sort of following our quest to find this thing, that we found it, and we were going back over there. Now, I don't know what we were going to do if we found it, but this time we did, gear back up. We went over there armed with shotguns and rifles and our hunting gear, basically. And we went back to this gate, this gate, big, heavy, structural, agricultural gate like you would buy in a co-op or something like that. It had a huge, U-shaped dent in the top of it where this thing had just, slammed that gate and bent it. In the daylight, we hunted around. We looked for tracks in that area, but it was sort of a pasture where all this had occurred with a few cedar trees in the pasture, and we never found any traces of it. We went back to the cave, didn't see any traces that it had been in the cave. And that is the last we ever saw of the creature. But I would say, we were at one point in time, we were probably as close as 30 feet. It was 30 feet behind us at the point where we had gone over the gate. It was very close to us. I would say it wasn't as tall as you hear most of the Sasquatch stories describing Bigfoot or something like that. This thing was probably 6 to, maybe not much more than 6 feet tall, but the sheer mass of its body, the hair made it, I'm sure, look bigger, but this thing was enormous. It had to weigh, over 300 pounds easily, maybe more than that. Maybe, it was just a massive, massive creature. And, that's pretty much the story.
That's incredible. That's a wonderful story. So, on that night that you encountered it, did you feel its presence before you saw it? Like, did you sense anything that night?
We actually did. We're out in this, and we're, at the point where we're walking, we're seeing these cow eyes. Everybody in the group stopped. Really before we got to counting cow eyes, we stopped because you could actually feel like an electrical charge, like a static electricity in your body. It was kind of tingling. We actually began to smell that smell of sulfur, and you could just feel the imminence of something about to happen, that something was there and something was watching you. It was a weird experience.
Now, the eyes that you saw, were they shining on their own, or was it reflecting the light?
I would say it was reflecting the light, just sort of like the cow eyes. I don't know if you're being from Texas, maybe you've experienced this. If you're out walking with like a spotlight that you would coon hunt or something with, and you shine it on a cow or a deer, you're going to get a nice luminous green reflection, or a cat.
Right.
A lot of times you'll see that in a cat. Well, that's what we were getting. But when we got to this set of other eyes, it wasn't like, flaming red. It was just a reflection, sort of a luminescence of red, like those eyes were reflecting, Yeah,
kind of like when you take a flash photo of someone, kind of like that red?
Yeah, kind of like that, and kind of like when you, if you were out at night in the field and you shine your light, or even your headlights, sometimes you can see deer's eyes reflecting before you can actually even see the silhouette of the deer. And that's what this was like. But it was, paralyzed, and they were glowing red from the light that we shined up, not glowing green. So we knew we weren't dealing with a cow.
Now, did you see ears on it?
Not really. The form of the head, kind of reminds me of, I would say, egg-shaped, half an egg, the top of the pointy end of an egg. There wasn't definition like ears, but you could definitely tell it was covered in fur.
Now, did it have a snout or a protruding mouth or anything? Or were you too far away?
I could tell.
Okay.
And, to be honest, this whole encounter probably lasted from the time that we actually spotted those red eyes, the time that we were in a full-out run back to the car with this thing in hot pursuit. It wasn't a long time. It was probably, 2-3 minutes. And then the run back to the car, the half-mile run back to the car, it was pretty quick. We'd run, and then say, stop, hold up. And then as soon as you did, you'd feel thud behind you. You could feel the impact of this thing behind you. I don't think it was a bear. I don't think a bear would pursue. Bears do stand up on their hind legs and kind of go bipedal there when they're, certain times. But this thing was running on two legs and came over that gate after smashing the top of the gate, came over it, just, one big step, like a hurdler, a track, running a track meet would go over a 3-foot hurdle or something. This thing did that to a 5-foot gate. It was up about 5 foot tall, to the point that we couldn't have stepped over the gate. We had to actually foot up on the middle slats of the gate and kind of throw our legs over and just sort of jump from there to get over the gate. This thing looked like it just propelled itself over the gate with one step. Whoop.
Wow. Now, when it took its arm and it hammered the gate, did you happen to see if it had human hands, like human-type hands, or...
I didn't. I don't recall detail like that, seeing that. I just remember seeing the arm, the massive, arm the size of my leg going up in the air and coming violently down, and hearing the impact, on that gate. And that gate stayed damaged. We showed a lot of people the gate. At one time, prior to seeing it, we had found the footprints. We had a cast of the footprints. We had begun to go around and try to examine the barbed wire for any kind of hair that looked out of place. And we did find some strange hair over there. We also took that hair into the science teacher, we examined it under microscopes. We did not have a lot of expertise in that, nor did our high school science teacher, but we did find some odd hair that we preserved that over the years. We never actually did anything with it. The footprint that we took in plaster, my parents and some of the other parents around the late 70s, it was all the rage to buy these plastic molds and have plaster of Paris and make these wall decorations that you would paint and decorate. And that was sort of a hobby for a couple of our parents were doing that. But the plaster didn't hold up too well in a shoebox. And over time, in a couple of years, that thing just disintegrated and broke into pieces. But we kept it around for quite a while.
Now, its posture, did it slouch at all, or was it fully straight?
When we first saw it, when the moon sort of the clouds came out from over the moon, you could see the thing kind of go from maybe almost like a squatting posture to a standing posture. It got taller all of a sudden. It's sort of like it stood up.
When it was coming after you, was it just coming straight for you, or was it kind of like trying to ambush you? Like, did it try to flank you or anything like that, or?
Well, we had, so this thing, imagine this thing being on the top of a hill up in a grove of cedar trees, and us looking up that hill, and then the car that we came in being, we're kind of walking along the edge of this hill. We look to our right up there and we see it. Well, we turn around to go the other direction back to the car. This thing starts running, kind of at an angle, like we're going toward the gate. It's kind of angling down to intersect our path. And then at some point, we get ahead of it, and then it's directly behind us. So I guess I would describe it like it came off the hill at an angle, running to sort of intercept us, and then at some point fell in behind us, and then was running straight behind us. I get a sense that we were extremely lucky that this thing didn't catch us, either that or it really did not intend to catch us, that maybe it intended to scare us, away from it. And it certainly succeeded in doing that. It wasn't until the light of day that we could muster enough courage to get back over there. Even in a group with, being fairly well, what we thought was fairly well armed to deal with something. Yeah, it was quite an experience. And all that sighting and everything occurred about a half a mile from where that original sighting a few months before that had occurred, where the girl had seen that thing. And during our exploration over there, we found a number of, maple and oak saplings that were broke up 6 feet in the air, just snapped off, like the top of the tree laying over on the ground, and the saplings would be snapped off at the top. And, so there was enough indicators over the elapsed time, between the footprints and the claw marks on the barn, finding some unusual hair, and finding that piece of a goat in the cave, and finding, these saplings broke, that we felt like this thing we might get a chance to see it. I will say that after that instance right there were no more signs. We continued to go back during the day and look for evidence of this thing. And, we never saw any signs of it, or never saw it again. There were additional accounts of similar creatures being spotted in farms by hunters all the way into the fall of that year. They were in the area. It was kind of, consistent with the area we were in, but it's like this thing was on the move, maybe.
Now, the hair itself that you found, what was the color?
Yeah, it was kind of reddish brown, very coarse hair. I wouldn't say it was all that different from the color of a cow's hair or whatever in its mane, but the texture of this hair was, almost like wire. It was very bristly. There was a large tuft of hair that was bigger than like a cow's reaching through the fence to try to get to, grass on the other side or eat something over there or whatever. This was unusual, which kind of drew our attention to it, because we had looked at, trying to find hair, trying to find any kind of sign, and whether or not this hair is attributable to what we saw, I don't know. I will say it was unusual to the point that we collected it and tried to take it to get some help, in identifying it, but we never really knew if it was associated or not.
About how long was it? Do you recall?
Yeah, it was pretty long, as I recall. Probably finger length and 4 or 5 inches, maybe.
Oh wow, that rules out a lot of things.
Yeah, this was not a small tuft of hair,
Yeah.
And
let's see. Oh, the goat that you found in the cave. Do you remember how it was eaten? Were the entrails removed, or was there throat damage?
It was really odd. This was like it would be the back half of a small animal, and we kind of surmised the goat. It was almost devoid of any hair. And if you can imagine like 2 raw hams with bones protruding out of the hams, as if the bottoms had been broken off or gnawed off. And it was, I would just describe it as partially eaten back half of a small animal that we felt like was probably the remains of a goat. But I remember it being like 2 hams attached to still attached to the backbone. It's like almost like the thing had been gnawed or ripped in half. There was almost no fur on it. It was wet and, really nasty, but still kind of fresh. Almost like it had been drug or something into that cave, through the creek that ran through the property maybe. We never found the other portion of the remains either. We were fairly savvy about things like that. We looked for buzzards and crows and, flocks and stuff like that, and we just never saw anything associated with this particular find.
Did you find any unusual scat in the area?
We looked for that, and not really. I would say, not beyond what we just normally find out in the woods. Knowing what deer, rabbit, and coon, the types of animals that we normally encounter. I I don't recall ever finding any. If we did, it wasn't that remarkable, you know.
And then the corrugated barn that you went to and you saw the scratch marks in it, did they go all the way through, or was it just like...
Yeah, a couple of sets. I mean, there were a lot of scratch marks on this barn. You know, we could only, speculate, like, what could make this? If you've ever seen what I would call a potato fork, it's a pretty big 3-tined fork, curved, that you would dig potatoes out of the ground or something like that with.
Right.
That's the closest thing I could equate it to, like if somebody had taken a potato fork and it wasn't like if you stabbed a potato fork in this, you'd have penetration, and then tried to peel it down, it would get, the marks would get, I guess, less deep. You would be penetrated and then pull it out and scratch, and then it would go from deeper to less deep. These were the kind of marks that started out scratching and wound up penetrating. It's like more force was applied as it came down. And almost like you would see, I don't know, if you were to put your fingers on a block of cheese and scratch and continue to apply pressure, it would get deeper and deeper. Well, this actually did that in a couple of places. There were these curlicues of metal left behind, and a couple of those actually penetrated the corrugated metal.
Were any of the trees scratched up, like marked?
We found a number of those broken saplings, but we didn't find anything like scratches or not even any deer rubs or anything like that in the area that I can recall on the cedar thickets or around, where you would, of course, in all honesty, it was probably early in the year to be finding rubs.
Right.
But we, I don't recall any of that. It's kind of interesting because we're all into, at that time, deer hunting. And in the 70s here in Middle Tennessee, there just weren't that many deer. Now they're so ubiquitous that it's crazy. But back then there weren't that many deer, but we were all attuned to what deer sign looked like. And, just weren't a lot of deer over there.
Now, the encounter that you had, was that, you said that was about 4 miles from Werewolf Springs. Was that towards the north or southwest?
It was west of there.
Okay.
I don't know if you're coming to the area, but if you are, there's a little meat and three restaurant called Janine's today. Back in the day, at that time, I think it was still a meat and three, but it's called High Point. And there was an access road back through there that everybody referred to as the gully. That's that valley that we would traverse to get up in there. Most of the time, we had, some of us had Jeeps or four-wheel drive Blazers or trucks, and then you could approach through the gully. On the night that we actually saw this thing, we come in from another area. We come in, west than up the gully. It was just, we drove on the roads as far as we could and then got out and walked up to that gate and came over. It's interesting. Today, the site where we saw this thing, there's now some townhouses have been built. I think the farm, they sold off part of the farm. Some townhouses have been built on it because, I have returned there many times in my life to kind of, just that gate stayed there for a number of years. And, I returned there a lot of times. And, but today it's almost unrecognizable from what it was back in 1978, 79.
If somebody were to come to Dickson County, what would be some of your recommendations of places to eat?
Well, up there in that area, if you're going to go around Burns and White Bluff, there is a barbecue joint called Fig and Pub. It's some really good Tennessee-style barbecue there. We do pork shoulders and ribs and briskets and sausages, but it's a little different than Texas for sure, because I've eaten a lot of Texas brisket and I love it. But it's that'd be a great place, great little local place. The other thing you'd want to do is go to a Little Bite of Everything down in Main Street, Dickson, which is 5 miles west of Werewolf Springs. Little Main Street there, just a great little town to visit with a traditional little main street and lots of good restaurants up and down the main street.
I thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Yeah, you're welcome, Ken. Best of luck to you and your family.
You too. Thank you, buddy.
I'll see you, man.
Take
Bye-bye.
it easy. Bye-bye. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this episode. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and until next time, we're off on another adventure. God bless.